Well, good morning, it's John Neal here. It is Sunday the 28th of December and I hope you're impressed with the way I can put the lettering behind myself. Just learned how to do that, by the way. And today, a little bit different, not just a bike ride, but I've got something to read out to you because I was listening to a gentleman, an old chap in his 80s actually. There's a couple of them. There's one or two YouTube channels with old fellas in the 70s and 80s, which is what I am, banging on about how they regretted doing this and they should have done this before and they shouldn't have done so and so, and it's all actually rather negative stuff, which I put a comment on one or two of them saying I sorted all that out when I was in my 20s, not being regretting of things I didn't do when I was in my 70s and 80s. Anyway, a slightly different issue, because there's one commentary that comes up quite often about older people saying, oh, it was so good in the good old days, we didn't used to lock our doors. I thought, why not? Didn't the locks not work? And how everything was much better back then. And I'm thinking, just hold on, isn't always the case. Come through.
Thank you.
Okay. So I've written a few comments on this subject. Well, I've come this way along the Wellington Walk because it's quite quiet. I know there'll be some dog walkers, I can see one now. Anyway, the first point is health and dentistry. Oh my goodness. Dentists back in the day, honestly, they were very good at what they did. Okay, thanks a lot. Hi, dogs. You only went to the dentist when you had trouble, if you had toothache, and people just did not go. I'm not sure when I'll have to look up when fluoride was put into the water, which did help. It might have been a bit of a gamble, that, but yeah, we put fluoride in the water in Great Britain and it helped a great deal. But people had toothache and your teeth were pulled out on a regular basis. In fact, both my parents didn't have a full set of teeth after their 50s. I think my dad lost all his teeth, they just all popped out because his gums were not good. In his, I think, late 40s, early 50s. And in fact, some people, get this, I couldn't believe this, but I heard tales of somebody saying that as a 21st birthday present, you could have all your teeth taken out and get provided with a set of false teeth. Age 21, that's a regular occurrence. Crazy. Thanks a lot, good morning. Dog walkers, love them. And in fact, I had, at one point, when I was about 13, 14, I had about 7 or 8 fillings all done in one go. Hiya. Well, not in one go, I kept on going back, but it's every week I went back and had another set done. Oh, it was horrendous, and they did move one of my teeth out, took one out, and my teeth moved across slightly. Fortunately, not too bad, but yeah, people with bad teeth were notorious, particularly when compared with Americans, that they looked upon our dentistry as being very poor, and it was. Nowadays, I think you can see most youngsters have beautiful teeth, and it makes a difference. Yeah, the dentistry, much better. Let's have a look at another part of health. This is health part 2. Smallpox and polio were a constant threat, and TB, tuberculosis, had only just been defeated. Smoking was seen to be good for you. Get this. And lung diseases of various sorts on older people are the result of decades of smoking, poor air quality and poor working conditions. Oh, you know, people working in factories and mines, in particular down mines, were in a terrible position for their lungs. And those diseases of the lungs, and smallpox and polio, were rife at the time. I say rife, not everybody had them of course, but we had to have vaccinations to combat them. And we did, and they were by and large successful. But it was the early days of vaccinations then, and nowadays some people are being wary of them. Strange. This is another point about health. When I was at school, it was commonplace in assembly, possibly once a week, for somebody to be sick, and I mean not the American sick, I mean actually vomiting, and throw up all over the floor, and the caretaker had to appear with a bucket of sawdust to mop up the mess. Standards of hygiene both in school, shops and at home were low. In the 1950s we had no hot running water in the house. No hot running water in the house, and no refrigerator. The food was probably better for us, but meat was expensive, and we only had chicken at Christmas. But the standards of hygiene, although people of course washed their hands and did so, but they weren't as high as they were now. And if you saw shops from the 1950s, they would have had open counters, like butchers would have the meat out and about. No real concern for keeping things separate and cool, like dairy products. Milk, for instance, milk was served and sold warm. I bumped into some Canadians once when I was youth hosteling when I was in my teens, and they went, you know, the big difference in this country from back home, they said, was that the milk is warm. Of course, yeah, of course it's warm. We don't have the fridges either in the shops or at home to keep it cool. I suppose this is moving slightly onto environmental issues, but smogs were terrible because most houses, particularly in the Midlands here, in the middle of England, were fueled and heated by coal fires in the house, and the resulting smoke that came out mixed with the fog and produced what we call smog, and it was as thick, as they said at the time, as pea soup. You could not see your hand in front of your face. I remember coming home from school once on the bus, and it was so bad the bus conductor had to get out and walk in front of the bus to find out where the road was. This is in one of the suburbs of the city of Coventry where I lived. And at one point the trees brushed against the side of the bus, the wrong side of the bus, meaning that we were actually on completely the wrong side of the road. It was horrendous. And of course the result of this back in the day was all the buildings in major cities up and down the country, particularly in the north and the Midlands, were in fact black. And only after the air pollution acts of Parliament to clean the air up, let me put the date on when some of that happened. So people just didn't realise the colour that they were when they were originally built. The stones and the rocks and bricks that were used to build many of the buildings were beautiful, beautiful colour, and they were all of them were black because of the poor air quality and the coal smoke that was in the atmosphere. Another issue, of course, was pesticides and pollution. Water pollution was very bad, and the pesticides were used by farmers like DDT, and it devastated the countryside, the wildlife, and it took a long time for us to realise what was going on and to get laws to prevent it. And apparently DDT was outlawed in 1972. I did read a book when I was at school called Silent Spring by Rachel Carson. Very influential. Right, let's move on. Get another point in a minute. Oh, there's a bike coming. Morning. Well, the next point is transport. As he arrives on his electric bike quite effortlessly. Transport. When I was a kid in the 1950s and 60s, in the little cul-de-sac that I lived, there were, I think, 3 cars among what must have been 30 houses. And I've driven along those streets recently, and there are cars everywhere. Every house is at least one car. So the numbers of cars on the road is increased phenomenally since the 1950s. And I'm talking therefore 50, 60 years ago. And Coventry was one of the major manufacturing centres for cars. And yet most people couldn't afford them. My dad had a motorbike actually, for the most part. We never had a proper car at home. If anything after that, he had vans. Let me see what else I got. Oh yes, MOTs and maintenance of cars was almost non-existent. There was no MOT, that is the Ministry of Transport test to check your car was in good order. I've got to take my car in for a test in the next month, and I will do that. If I didn't, it would be illegal. I couldn't be insured. But back in the day, the tyres, the brakes, the steering, it just didn't matter. If it didn't work properly or they'd worn out, you would have a crash, and that was it. The other thing is drink driving. I have a relative who said many a time they would go out on a Saturday or a weekend and get drunk, and they would drive home as best they could, and that was it. And of course, drink driving is one of the major causes of deaths on the road. It's a good job there weren't many cars on the road, to be honest, because with the dangerous condition of the cars and people being drunk and driving, it was a nightmare. So we were very lucky that we survived at all. But as I say, there were far fewer cars on the road back in the 50s and 60s. Oh dear. It's difficult to think about it, really, isn't it? This list goes on. How about seatbelts? They weren't compulsory in this country until 1983, and as I said, drink driving was commonplace. Still happens now actually, but there you go. But getting around was just difficult. We lived in North Coventry when I was a young kid, and my grandmother lived in Rugby. And to get to Rugby, which we did on Sunday afternoons occasionally, I used to go with my mother, and I had to take a Coventry Corporation bus into Coventry. This is just a short pause while the lady comes by with her little dog and passes a comment.
Playing with the Christmas present.
I've had it 4 years. Stop it, you. Lady, did you catch that? Am I playing with my Christmas present? Well, essentially yes, but that was about 4 years ago. What was I saying? Yes, my grandparents on my mother's side lived in Rugby, and to get there you had to go on a bus to Coventry, then a Midland Red bus over to Rugby, which called in all the villages on the way. It took about 2 hours from our house to their house, and then obviously the same return journey. The distance was about 17 miles. In a car it did not take half an hour. So things are so much better now in terms of transport and getting around. Back in the day it was quite horrendous, and again it's all more to do with the communication between people. You just couldn't get around to see people in the same way as you can today. It's so much more convenient. So the good old days in the past, transport not quite the same. This pathway, the Weddington Walk, is really quite pleasant. It's tarmacked because it used to be a path along this old route of the railway, and when the builders were building in this area, part of the deal was to tarmac it, and they've done a good job, and it's very nice along here. So it's remarkable to think that we can contact and talk to people anywhere in the world at any time and see their face and have a conversation. Absolutely brilliant. I mean, crikey, these are the good old days. Oh, by the way, I'll put on top of that, of course, we didn't have a telephone in the house until I was about 15, 16. Well, we just didn't have one. That's why there were the red telephone boxes that you go to, put your money in and dial your number up. If any, that's if you were ringing somebody who had a phone. And most people just did not have phones. Nowadays, everybody seems to have one, even young kids. It's only the older folk that sometimes don't have them. Yeah, see, there you go. Right, what's next? Status of women. Yeah, when I was a young kid, I had two sisters, my mum, so there's three women in the house, and yeah, they didn't have a particularly good time. You might or might not have known this if you're not of this age. This is what it was like. Women were treated by the patriarchal society as second-class citizens. Things were getting better, but there was still no equal pay, and domestic abuse was common as divorce was frowned upon, and women had little financial independence. I actually have that as an example in my own family, unfortunately. And also the pill had only just been invented, and the slavery to childbirth, either inside or outside of marriage, was commonplace, and backstreet abortionists were awful, absolutely awful. So back in the day there was no pill. Women had less money because they were paid less, unbelievably. If you were doing the same job as a man, the man would have got paid more. End of story. That was it. It took a long time for people to get for women to get equal pay with men, which is hard to believe nowadays. And still there's a struggle for women today, and after all these years, but it has got a lot better, and there are many women in positions of influence, I'll say power, and all for the better, I think. Absolutely. But back in the day, oh my goodness, I always remember there's a piece from the TV program Life on Mars, which was set in the 70s in a police station. There's a great line for the inspector when he realised that one of the women was a detective. So he told her to go and detect some tea and a Garibaldi for them all. That's all they were worth, was secretaries and tea ladies, basically. They were seen as being nothing else. Unbelievable. Right, on we go. You know, just reading through some of these notes, I'm just going, oh dear, because I have not yet run out of subjects about the good old days that weren't so good. The next one's about children, and I'm thinking of education in particular for the moment, because there were some improvements made in the 60s actually. I remember my primary school days with great fondness, and we had some quite innovative teachers. However, we were streamed in 3 different classes, top stream middle and bottom, and that was it. And whoa, here we go. And the 11 plus was always looming at the end of the primary school years, to pass the 11 plus or not, which fortunately I did, and it was fortunate. And if you didn't, then it was a struggle. And I suppose that leads me on to the next point about schools, is that there are certain problems that kids have, like dyslexia, which were not recognised at all. There would be many bright kids who would miss out on a decent education because of their dyslexia. For example, a very good friend of mine, her son was dyslexic and struggled to read at school, but this is in the last couple of decades, they managed to support him and enable him to fulfill his potential. He is now a consultant anaesthetist, and yet he was dyslexic and needed that extra help. How many other people, children, grew up being hampered by not being given the correct support? And now, of course, we've got lots of other things thrown into the mix, like dyspraxia and ADHD. So things are looking better, but it's a tough road. It's a tough road to support people with special needs. Well, I suppose it's appropriate that I'm sitting down here in a children's playground for the next part of the conditions for children back in the day, and that is child abuse. Absolutely bone-chilling, the idea that children, their beautiful upbringing, which should be the happiest days of their lives and so formative as well, as I well know for having been a school teacher, could be blighted with abuse, both physical abuse, mental abuse and sexual abuse. Absolutely terrible, and often done by professional people in educational establishments. And I'm not going to start pointing fingers at particular organisations or groups of people, but it went on and it was terrible, absolutely awful. And it's taken a number of decades to get to the bottom of this and to bring people to justice, if they ever did come to justice. Absolutely appalling. I'm stuck for words to go through what that must have meant for those poor kids. And it ruined them for life. Ruined them for life. Really did. And so that was in the back in the good old days. Fortunately, I never, in all the schools and places and groups, scouts, cadets, camps, I never came across any instances that affected me directly. But when you realise what did happen and things that have come out in the news and investigative reporters have reported on, absolutely terrible. So, yeah, that's one thing that has changed. I don't think it's been obliterated, but it has changed, and we are very, very conscious now of looking after kids in vulnerable situations. Wow. Hey! We're nearly there, don't worry. I was cycling round. I dropped me a bit of paper so somebody can pick up the script of what I've been talking about. Next point, another sadness about the old days is racism. It was quite common to be openly discriminatory about people of different colours and races. We haven't got over that yet, of course, but it's a lot better than it was. My God, or just think back. I mean, discrimination was just open and rife. It was terrible. Right, what else? Oh, homosexuality. It was illegal up to the 50s and 60s to practice homosexuality. And of course, one of the most tragic cases was Alan Turing, the famous, world famous mathematician and computer expert who made his name during the Second World War, was homosexual, and it was such a blight on his life that he committed suicide in the 1950s. Absolutely terrible. So fortunately nowadays, with all the other complications involved, homosexuality is more acceptable, more generally, let's put it that way, and certainly not against the law. Finally, religion. When I was going to school in Coventry, both at primary school and secondary school, the grammar school, we were taught Christianity basically. No other religions were mentioned, although there were other religions around. There were Muslims, there were Sikhs in particular. We had a Sikh boy in our class when I was at primary school, and we were fascinated by him, both his culture, his clothes, and we didn't know so much about his religion, though, I must admit. And then really after some race riots in the 1980s, there was a move to educate people about other faith groups. And this fitted in perfectly, by the way, with me becoming a Baha'i with my wife in 1986, because the idea of how all the religions sort of fitted together and the part that they played was an important part of my thinking. And so the movement towards multi-faith appreciation and trying to understand people of other faiths and how they all fitted in has become more and more important as the years have gone by. And most significantly, King Charles has spoken on that point, both in this year's King's speech at Christmas and last year as well. So there we have it. All those things in all those different areas I think were not so good in the good old days. As I said before, some things were okay back in the day, but by and large there were a lot of bad things happening. So most of those issues have been addressed now by the people who are now in their 60s and 70s and 80s. So maybe some improvements have been made, and we've been the ones that have done it. But there's still work to do. So if you are a younger person, then keep fighting, because there's still things that need changing to make the world a better place. But anyway, that's my take on the good old days. I don't know what you think about it. I'd love to hear your comments. So please put them down below. I'll be interested to see what you have to say. Okay, thanks very much for watching, and you'll see me in the next one. Okay, bye-bye.